and welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and this is a very special episode today. I have a very big announcement to share, which you may or may not have seen on social media. So if you have not, you might be a little surprised, but I will share that in just a moment. From this news, this episode really came to life. I am really excited to share just some things on my mind today. And I just want to preface this episode by saying my episodes aren't exactly scripted, but this is a little less scripted than usual. So please forgive me in advance for any, lack of polish on my words or pauses in thought, because this was an episode that, while I definitely have certain things on my mind that I wanted to, bring up and address and acknowledge, I really wanted to allow this to be more of like a free-flowing conversation and to allow myself to, say anything else if I get a download of something or something else comes to mind. So this is really just as authentic from me to you as possible. But to just preface this conversation, you may or may not have seen in the title of this episode, but this episode is going to be talking about pregnancy, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there are plenty of people in this grief space, listeners of this podcast, who might be anywhere on the spectrum of having trouble conceiving, who have lost a child. Number one, I just want you to know that you are in my heart today, truly. I mean that just so wholeheartedly. But if this episode is difficult for you to listen to at any point, please feel free to turn it off. I understand. There's definitely been some triggering things in my grief journey, more with like parents or like pet loss, that I've had to just kind of, come back to when I was ready, or maybe never come back to it at all. And that's okay. But what I'm here to do today is to just share this exciting news with you, because I very much consider the listeners of this podcast my extended family. This grief space really just bonds us all in such a way, and I love it. I think that's such a beautiful part of it. We can all be complete strangers and, have our different grief journeys, but maybe we've lost some of the same people. I mean, whatever it looks like, but we can come together and just understand some of the principles of loss, some of the fears that can manifest and come from having lost someone or something, right? This is not just about a death in the family. You might be going through more of like a secondary loss or a divorce or, your loss of health or something. So anyway, wherever you are today, please just know I am sharing this with the best of intentions. And I really just hope this maybe speaks to you in some way, this touches you in some way, and maybe you can relate to some of these things in some way, even if you're not having a baby right now. But either way, I'm just so excited to share just a little bit more of a personal side with you. And with that, we'll get into it. So I think I've alluded to this pretty well by now, so the surprise is kind of gone, but I am pregnant. As of the recording of this episode, I am 18 weeks, so it's about 4.5 months. It has been a whirlwind so far. It has been a really beautiful experience so far, I must say. But there have been a lot of things that have come to the surface, as it would with any big news or big life event or a pregnancy, right? There's a lot of changes, a lot of emotions. And your gain from today's episode is to learn 7 ways that I have either changed, ways that my mindset has shifted, and things I've realized since finding out that I'm pregnant and are embarking on this new phase of life. And I know that was a bit vague, but I really didn't want it to be so 7 things I've learned, because really this is such, just like grief, it's such an ebb and flow, and it's such a journey of realization and my God, I'm thinking and feeling and experiencing new things every day. So that is really just kind of the gist of this episode. But I will definitely say this episode also has, I think, some really important and really impactful mindset shifts that, again, even if you're not expecting, I think you could really benefit from, or at least very much empathize with. So stay tuned, and I'm really excited to just share this insight with you today. But just to get a couple general things out of the way that you may or may not be wondering or curious about. These are typically some of the first questions that my husband and I have been getting. What we're having. Yes, we did decide to find out we are having a little girl. I mean, it was such a shock. And it was such a shock for me, especially because I 1000% thought we were having a boy. I don't really know why. All those old wives' tales, which, by the way, I have to admit, I really don't subscribe to a lot of those now, because all of those classic things with, having a girl, right? Like you're super sick and you have acne and all those things. Like, this is not to be obnoxious, but none of those things really happened to me. I had some morning sickness. I did have some nausea and things in the first few weeks, maybe I would say between weeks 5 and 9. So pretty early on, but I would say after week 10, it really let up. And I have to say, this is not, again, to be obnoxious or shove this in anyone's face. I've just been very fortunate with my pregnancy in that I, just haven't been particularly sick but there are certainly days where I'll have lower energy or a headache might come on. I'm certainly not without symptoms, but by and large have been very lucky. But anyway, that's how we found out. And it was just oh my gosh, pure and utter excitement. Again, I think it was just a lot of shock that whole night. I just could not even, I didn't even know what to do with myself. It was just so cool. And, at that point, I really didn't care which gender we had. I didn't care if it was a boy or girl. I started to understand, I get it when people are just I just want them to be healthy. I just want them to be okay, And same goes for my husband, really. I mean, we kind of were just not that there's pros and cons to each, but we were kind of it'd be really cool to have a girl for this reason, or cool to have a boy for that reason, and whatever. Anyway, moral of the story, we hope to have one of each one day, but that is a later problem because I got to get this one out first. But we are due, that's another question that we're getting a lot. We are due in February of 2024, kind of around the 20th to 22nd right now. So as she grows, hopefully we'll get a more official date. And it's really cool because my birthday is February 2nd. So I'm going to have a fellow February birthday baby. That was kind of a tongue twister. Lots of excitement all around, to be honest. But there's, a lot of other things that have come up in this process. So that's really what I want to share with you today. So now that those kind of more general, difficult questions that people always ask are out of the way, let's get into it. So I alluded to the fact that some days I've definitely had a little bit of a lower energy, or just, maybe don't totally feel like myself or whatever it is. Let me tell you, this pregnancy has been the biggest humbling experience in terms of having to take a step back. I have definitely had to scale back in terms of energy that I'm exerting, work that I'm doing, the amount of work that I'm doing, and really just what I can commit to. So both work-wise, but also just socially, right? Just what I'm in the mood to do. And with losses become gains, for example, I have been in such a phase of building, of creating, right? This podcast, of course, I've just been in this mode of really embodying sort of my more masculine side and building Losses Become Gains from the ground up, which has been like the most fulfilling thing in my life, short of, getting married and some other milestones, growing a human now, of course. But I've really had to take a step back and listen to my body from a business perspective, from the losses become gains perspective. Again, I've been in such a phase of building and putting more and more out there. But I've really had to take a step back and have some very honest conversations with myself about what is really realistic for me to be able to do. So one perfect example of this is I was that girl who was posting 7 days a week from the very moment I got on Instagram and started posting for Losses Become Gains. Up until maybe about a couple months ago, I was posting every single day. And that's not to be braggy. That's not to say that in any other way other than, I just had an abundance of information and tools and guidance and inspiration and things to share. It was like kind of flowing out of me in a way. And I think that's such a beautiful gift of really finding your calling, even though Losses Become Gains is really so much more than a calling to me. It's really like, it's my soul. Now it is being in this space is what I'm meant to do. I truly believe that. But, from a technical perspective, it does take time and it does take energy. So I just took it back just a little bit. I was like, okay, what would make this just a little bit easier on me right now? And I just went down from posting to 7 days a week to 5 days a week. And that was tough because it's not like the content didn't stop coming. I still have plenty of ideas and lots of things that I want to share, but I also know that I really need to respect my boundaries and I need to honor this phase of life that I'm in and just listen to what my mind and my body needs. And, same thing with blog posts. That was another one that I really had to certainly not take a step back from. If anything, Losses Become Gains was born as a blog. It really means a lot to me to continue bringing you that content, those tools, those resources, that guidance, again, that inspiration in the form of a blog. And I know because I've had so many people, and I'm so blessed about this, that have come to me and said, I really appreciate this piece. I really appreciate you talking about, whatever it was, anticipatory grief or, this array of subjects. And I would be remiss if I did not continue that mission, right? But let's be real, blogs can take a hot minute, right? Sometimes like I really want to think about like, okay, what do I want to talk about? And why do I want to launch this blog post right now as opposed to later? And then of course the writing process. And there's no better way for me to say this, really just making sure it's not half-assed, right? Like I don't want to put anything out there to you guys from the blog to social to the podcast to anything where it's not fully baked, right? Which is really fun with pregnancy brain, let me tell you. But I digress. It's just those little things that have had to just shift a little bit, right? Not go away completely, but shift. And it's all the more reason, and it's just yet another thing that I'm trying to plan ahead for and think about for closer to when the baby comes, because I know when that happens, I might not have it in me to write a blog post, right? Or do as many social posts. I might not even have the bandwidth. I don't know. This is my first child. So we'll just have to see how it all goes. I am also very lucky that I have my husband, not so much with support with Losses Become Gains. Like I said, it's everything I do myself, but more just from like a moral support perspective and, just to bounce ideas off of or whatever it is, or completely not business related. If I'm just having a tough day with the pregnancy or for whatever reason, maybe I'm feeling hormonal or I just cannot explain what the heck it is I'm feeling, just having an understanding, force of nature in your circle. So much of processing anything in life, right? Things with work or difficult situations you might be going through with that or with friends or family, or, your grief or something maybe you're trying to create in life. Like I am with Losses Become Gains, right? having the right support around you is super, super important. And so between that and just really tapping into your intuition and being like, okay, what feels good to me? What feels right? And, kind of coming out of ourselves a little bit and asking those questions, I think is just so important. So again, just to kind of summarize this first point on this episode today, it's really just about listening to your intuition, right? And taking a step back and kind of coming out of ourselves a little bit and saying, really asking, what feels good to me right now? What feels good to me in this moment? Or what feels realistic for me to get done? And being okay with that and finding some comfort in that. And I know with grief, this is such a big thing, right? I've kind of sort of in a sort of a dark way joked about this on the podcast before. Like we sometimes can't even make it outside that day, right? I've been there where you just can't adult that day. You just cannot do life that day. But that is the perfect opportunity for you to get comfortable with yourself, almost get comfortable in the aloneness, because you will learn so much about yourself and so much will come to light for you. And there are these beautiful downloads that you can get when you really just allow yourself to sit and be and ask yourself, what feels good? What feels right? Because then you build up that trust, you build up that intuition with yourself. So anyway, I will end this first section of this episode here, but I just want you to think about that today again, whether you're going through pregnancy or your grief journey. So number 2 on sort of this unofficial list of things that have kind of occurred to me and are things I'm thinking about and working through since I found out I was pregnant was the sacredness of keeping things between you and your partner for a little while and the importance of that. So you might be asking, what exactly do you mean by that, Tara? So a couple things. Number 1, with my husband and I, finding out the gender ourselves, and not through maybe necessarily a gender reveal party or something, was something that was really something that we wanted to do and was meaningful for us. And I'll actually give my husband some credit here. It was really more his request. I actually, to be honest with you, I was that girl for a long time that was like, yeah, I want to find out in a cool way at a gender reveal party. Why not? But then he was kind of like, well, do you really want to find out with everyone else? I just think it would be such a kind of a sacred and special moment for us to find out together just by ourselves. And I was like, wow, that's a really beautiful and intimate thing. What a lovely thought. And my husband's he's an amazing person and he can get deep, but that was especially deep for him, sort of. And so I was like, I think that's a beautiful thing. Let's do it. Amazing. So that's what we did, as I mentioned. So I won't go through that whole story, but I will just say I'm so happy we did that. And that is not to push anybody here listening, if you maybe are in a place where you aren't having kids yet, or you haven't found out the gender or whatever, that you have to do this. I am simply sharing our experience, but it really did sort of heighten the intimacy about that. And honestly, it was just kind of a fun little secret to kind of keep between just us for, I think we knew for probably 3 weeks before we told anybody, before we told family first and some friends, and then, announced it to the world on social media. But I will just say, if that is something you're kind of maybe going back and forth with or something, just consider, even if it's not the gender or not revealing the name or whatever it is, however you can, kind of heighten that intimacy between you and your partner. I think that's just really important, and especially in such a big, momentous time in your life. What better opportunity to bring you even closer together in an even more, special way than creating a life, as if that is not special enough, right? And on a sort of related note to this, I am also, again, speaking about social media and having a presence on there, I'm still kind of in this mode of trying to figure out how much I want to share. And I mean this in a couple of different ways. Number one, and I think I even said this in my caption when I first posted it, I want to acknowledge this particular community that we're in, this grief space, hearing about, a happy, joyful pregnancy and a baby and all of these things can be really difficult for some people to hear who are struggling with that or have had challenges in that area or have lost children themselves. The last thing I ever want to be is insensitive to that, which is why I prefaced this episode early on when I did, right? And so there's just, a part of me that doesn't, again, this is more of what I share on social media, that I don't want it to be this, now free for all of just like, oh, look at me and my bump and my baby and all of these things. Like that's, of course, I want to do those things. And I do have a special Instagram account, my personal account, which you are welcome to go follow. It's just at Tara Accardo. I will link it in the show notes, where I share more of that side of my journey and my lifestyle and, outfits I'm wearing and just kind of fun things where it's more me. It's more my personality. Losses Become Gains is completely me as well. It's also my personality. It's just a different side, right? And I just want to make sure that I'm talking about this pregnancy in the right places. But of course, on this podcast, again, for anybody who is maybe in the same phase of life or will be or wherever you're at, I just want it to be a helpful, inspiring sort of happy thing. But I understand that is not the reality for everybody, right? So that's kind of one way where I'm still trying to figure out how much I want to share and in what way, and to just do it as tastefully as I possibly can, right? Having been through grief myself and knowing what that's like and knowing what it's like to have that kind of shoved in your face. It's not a good feeling, even if somebody's not meaning to. But the other thing is also, as I just mentioned, my personal account, but there's just so much going on now about privacy and the privacy of children. And, part of me, I'm so back and forth. Sometimes I'm just like, how could I, when she's born, how could I not share her face? I'm going to want to share so many milestones and so many exciting, beautiful things. But then sometimes I'm like, she didn't sign up for that, right? Like that is on me to be posting on social media or wherever I would post about her. She didn't sign up for that. I did. So there's such a back and forth that I'm going between, because there's a part of me that wants to be really vulnerable and I am excited and there are things I want to share. And eventually when she comes, like she's part of that, right? She's an extension of me and my husband. And I just know that that's something that, you're going to want to shout from the rooftops in a way. Some people do. And I just know that about myself, and I know that's coming, but I want to do so just in a tasteful way and in a way that respects her and her privacy, because she is a little soul here too, and she deserves that. So, it's just interesting with social media and just with just the abundance of sharing nowadays and just figuring out how much of that I want to do. But again, I'll just bring up that personal Instagram I have one more time, at Tara Accardo. That is really where I felt called to share, more of the day-to-day and things like that. And so if there's, a way you want to connect with me on that platform and just see sort of more of, I guess, the behind the scenes, for lack of a better term, that's what that is sort of for. And just really respecting losses become gains and what that is. And that is, really being able to provide people just like you the right tools and resources about grief and how to handle grief, and inspirational, encouraging content that is appropriate for wherever anyone is at in their life right now, and not making it so pregnancy focused, right? Hopefully all of this makes sense. So that was a bit of a brain dump, but I think it's important, and especially in the age of social media and this sharing, sometimes oversharing area that we cross into. I think it's an important one. Number 3 here, and switching gears a bit, but I'm sure so many of us, baby or not, because I know this happens in the grief world and space. I've talked about it many, many times between the blog and on social and all the things, is unsolicited advice. Oh man, it's where do I start? It's appreciated, but it is overwhelming. And I will just say, like, in my world at least, I've had, and this is a beautiful thing, multiple friends and family members all have babies within the last year. Like, it's crazy. There's, I think, probably at least 5 or 6. And each one has their own opinions on how things should be done, what things to buy, what things not to buy, what things to worry about, what things not to worry about. It is so specific to the child, to the parents, to personal preference. And quite frankly, it's something I've sort of had to just bite the bullet on. It's just so much, and people don't always know that you're getting it from so many different places, right? So that's the thing. And this is where grief comes into this space too. People mean well. If something has worked for them, that's something that they might want to be caring and sharing with you. And that's where these good intentions lie ultimately. But again, it's just with everything else too. I keep bringing up social media a lot on this episode today, but that's another place where whether or not we are realizing it, we're taking in a lot of information. I just talked about things that I share, and I don't want anyone to let me influence them in any particular way. It's more just sharing my experience, right? But we're just constantly inundated with different experiences and what's good and what's bad. And sometimes they can be, things that don't agree with each other, which leaves us even more confused. And from a baby perspective, what stroller to buy, what, diapers are best, what wipes to use, and just everything. And so I've realized I've had to kind of just grin and bear it. But it's hard because sometimes, especially as a first-time mom, what you don't know, right? So sometimes the things that they'll say are actually really helpful. Or, babies are expensive. It will be something that saves my husband and I money. So had they not said that, we might have bought something that wasn't super great, or, and they had like a legitimate reason for saying like, yes, this is good, or no, it's not. So like anything else in life, you just have to take things with a grain of salt. And again, that intuition that I was just talking about, coming back to that and feeling out what is good for you. And that's really where I'm at right now too, especially because she's not born yet, right? She's still cooking in there. And of course, there are plenty of things where we're going to have to buy things ahead of time and be prepared and have a plan, be planful. But there will be things that come to where we're just going to have to learn for ourselves. And I embrace that. I'm excited for that. I want that for myself and for my husband. And, so it's just this lovely double-edged sword of having these very supportive and very caring and loving people around us that mean well with what they say. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's like, okay, this is too much. Or they kind of assume you don't know things and are like talking to you. I'm not going to say as if you're stupid or you don't know, but like that's truly how I've felt sometimes. I've had a couple of people be like, you're going to take your belly button ring out, aren't you? And I'm like, yes, I'm aware. I'm going to do it soon. It's all good. Don't worry about me. You stay in your lane. I'll stay in mine. And this is true in so many aspects of life, right? We can experience this at work. We can experience this with friends and family in our grief journey where it's like, yeah, we know. We don't need people telling us. I know this is so hard, you guys. And so I'll leave this point here, but I just want to acknowledge this. So whatever space in life you're in right now, I understand how frustrating and exhausting unsolicited advice can be. And I just wanted to share my thoughts on that and sort of how I've had to just digest it all. And it's not like it's in one ear out the other per se, but it's more just like, okay, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. Good to know. So, number 4, this is sort of a funny random one, but I'm sure some moms and dads out there can maybe relate to this. I have found I am driving more defensively and carefully, but not just with driving. I'm just being more cautious all around, really, just with certainly things I'm eating, but just the way that I'm treating my body and moving in a way that feels good and avoiding things that, could feel harmful to myself or the baby, which I think is really interesting. I think there's a lot of, for some people out there at least, natural instinct that kicks in, whether or not we realize it. And I actually, I'll be very, very blunt here. I haven't sort of had this aha moment, and maybe it's because I haven't felt a ton of kicking or things yet. I'm just getting to that point where I'm feeling rumblings. I think I've actually felt maybe a little itty bitty kick or two, but I'm still kind of small enough to where I'm not, I still feel like myself, but not quite. I just really feel bloated 24/7, to be honest, which is really fun trying to fit in all my jeans and all the things. But having, again, just that intuitive hit of okay, this feels good for me. This feels good for baby. No, maybe shouldn't do that. And this is going to be probably a quicker point here, but I just found that so interesting. And I just want to also say here, if there's any moms or moms to be or whatever that are going through maybe any phase in this process but haven't felt overwhelmingly oh my gosh, me and my baby, I'm so protective, I'm so just, I'm so maternal. I haven't had that overwhelming feeling yet. So I just want to validate anybody here listening who might be going through this. Please don't feel bad about that. Don't shame yourself about that. I have struggled with that a little bit. And like I was alluding to before, I think that's maybe because of where I'm at in my journey. I'm really not sure. And the next actually point that I'm going to talk about, I think, is a part of this and maybe why it doesn't happen right away for all of us is what I've sort of just learned, not from other people, just from within myself. And that's okay. And we're all on different journeys. We're all unique and different. And that goes for grief too. It's why I say, there's no timeline. There's no right or wrong way or time to feel certain things. And that's okay. And that's beautiful in and of itself, because again, we're each unique individuals, and that in and of itself deserves to be embraced. So basically what I'm saying is not to fall into any kind of comparison game, whether you are an expectant or current mom or dad to be, whether this is your grief journey that we're talking about here, and you maybe have some outside forces being well, why aren't you over it by now? Or, oh my gosh, you seem like you're over it really quickly. Are you okay? Or, there's so many opinions and unsolicited advice and judgments that can come in from people who are ultimately speaking on their own experience. So it's just something that I've known already, but I think is really heightened for me, is that I am my own person. So I'm going to feel what I need to feel when I need to feel it. And that cannot be rushed. That can't be slowed down. That is just something I have to embrace and feel in my own time. But I brought up the defensive driving and things like that because there have been moments where I'm even just a little bumpiness or something, if I'm on a bike ride and I'm just oh gosh, I hope she's okay, little things like that. That has been more heightened for me, where some people might be a little less worried about that. So it's just one of those things that I just would be remiss, again, if I didn't bring this up just to share my experience, but also remind you that it's okay, that you are in your own lane, and that you don't worry about the people to the left and right of you.